Alright, today we're here with urban farming guru, pioneer, John Ameroso, and he's been kind enough to come talk tomatoes with us today. So we're right in the middle of the big tomato season and talking about how to grow them, the best ways to do it, some things you don't need to do maybe so much of. But you know, everybody loves tomatoes. There's a reason why they're so expensive at the market. It's a combination of because they're delicious and because they're actually really hard to grow. They can present a lot of problems and take a lot of time to grow successfully. So we're going to talk to John a little bit about, you know, how you can best grow your own tomatoes. So first of all, what are some major environmental factors that might harm your tomato plants or make them hard to grow?
Usually when you first start thinking about doing tomatoes, you want to have absolutely a sunny spot. Because tomatoes are highly susceptible, particularly the heirloom tomatoes, which everybody wants. And we call them heirlooms because they once disappeared because of plant breeding and stuff. We're able to breed varieties of tomatoes that are basically resistant to some of the diseases that are most common with tomatoes, which you have here.
Yeah.
And that's the diseases.
Yeah.
So as far as light, sunlight, also air movement is important for the plants. So that's why you see most people will trellis their plants. If you're a farmer in the field, you can't possibly trellis all your plants, so you just let them flop on the ground. But in that case, when you're doing that, you're also using resistant tomato varieties that are resistant to the two most common diseases with tomatoes, which is the verticiculum wilt and the fusarium wilt, which both are fungus diseases. And they're soil-borne diseases, meaning that the fungus is in the soil and is taken up by the roots. It's not splashed on the plants from other sources. But any farmer or anybody, urban farmer that's going to do heirlooms, most definitely has to stake the plants up. You want to have enough air movement so as not outside of air movement, but also where you're growing the plants. An example would be right here where we have, which I'm just kind of guessing because it's older leaves. This could be the verticiculum wilt because it attacks the older plant and upper leaves, but the fusarium wilt usually burns out the bottom of the plant first.
So what's the best way?
Well, the best way is that next year you're not going to plant your heirlooms in this spot here.
Yeah,
you're probably going to select varieties that say they're VF resistant, verticiculum resistant, or fusarium resistant, which are newer varieties and which are tasty enough, but still the demand is for the heirlooms. So the heirlooms, now you have to take extra precaution about almost like the thing about bubble boy. You have to keep them away from other things because they're going to, you know, particularly we have weather like this where we have wet, you know, like it's been kind of a wet season enough that other fungus diseases can attack it too, not only the soil-borne, but you have the anthracnose and you have the other one that I think we saw something here. You have early blight and late blight, which are airborne spores that could be bouncing off of debris in the garden or come from somewhere else and onto the plant. And when you have the right conditions, which is anything between 60 and 80 degrees, something like that, that's what hatches these fungus on the plants. So the key is having air, sunlight, air to get through the plants, and also be cautious of your soil. Know what you planted where. On this spot here, where we're maybe showing signs of verticiculum, next year you're going to put a variety that says VF resistant, then you really don't have to worry about what's in the soil, what's in the debris.
So keep good records. Make sure you know where you put your stuff the year before. So what's your favorite way to trellis tomatoes to keep it off to keep your plants off the soil?
It depends on how many you have.
Yeah.
If you're a backyard gardener with 5 or 6, you're going to use a single stake. If you have a row that's maybe 30, 40 feet long, you may do stakes with a double wire that you can tie the plants to. But anything bigger than that is going to be too much trouble to really run wire that far. So you have to devise these other systems. But I've been noticing in farmers that are coming to green markets who are growing heirlooms out in the field, they're growing them on black plastic with drip irrigation. They stake those tomatoes. They told me you don't let those go on the ground because they're going to get every possible fungus disease there is and possibly everything else that's transmitted by insects, you know, the bacterials and the viruses. So they stake their tomatoes, and there's a reason for it because they're valuable. And you can get, you know, you want to get as much production as possible before the plant kicks the bucket.
So a lot of people invest a lot of time in taking care of their tomatoes tomatoes at home, and everybody has their little theories of like how to do it best. Have you ever heard of things that are unnecessary, like maybe things that people do that are just going too far, or myths about tomato production?
A lot of times people pay too much attention to the plant, and they're always trying to tie this thing up to that. And in reality, you just want the plant to be upright.
Yeah.
You let air go through it. In a lot of cases, too, they always hear about pruning the plant. But this is not a tree, where you're pruning a tree to open it up and stuff like this. When they're talking about pruning tomatoes, they're basically taking out what is known as a sucker. And the best way to describe a sucker is like right here. See this? It's usually, an example would be, how you explain is that if you raise your arm in the air and something was growing out of your armpit, that's a sucker. But this is August. I wouldn't take them off. Because right now, we're losing daylight, vegetation growth slows down, it's more going towards fruit production. So you want as much green surface area as possible to encourage fruit production. Earlier in the season, like before July 1st, well, longest day of the year, June 21st, usually we recommend pruning before that time period. But then you stop. You don't want to lose valuable leaves at this time.
So this time of year, some plants might be winding down actually, but if you see signs of disease, what are some basic things you could do to kind of at least slow it down?
Well, basically you have to look at preventive measures, like knowing that you're going to have problems next year, particularly with you had signs of early blight, but that's not the blight everybody's afraid of. The late blight is the one that knocks the plant completely out. When you get that, it's done with. But those diseases can be prevented by preventive sprays because the funguses attack the leaves. And so that means finding an organic spray of some sort and then following a schedule with it what that product recommends. Soil-borne jobs, the verticillin and fusarium wilts, you just have to know about crop rotation. Putting maybe even other tomatoes that are VF resistant there, but putting other crops in, just like farmers are doing crop rotation. And what was the other thing we just asked?
Just about
practices that they're doing
after you
practices with the tomatoes, right?
Yeah.
That's primarily it. People paying too much attention to plant pruning and stuff.
Yeah.
But as long as you give the proper growing conditions to the plant, like you plant the proper time that it says after the last frost, but normally in this area it's around May 15th, even if we don't have a frost May 15th. But doing it any earlier, you're risking problems because the soil's too cool. You risk more chances of the fungus diseases. Plant the proper time, your soil conditions, pH is good, you have your fertility levels up, and it's prime it. You should have no problem.
Great. So 2 quick questions. What's your favorite kind of tomato to grow, and what's your favorite kind of tomato to eat? Those can be 2 different things because the grower likes it a certain way and the consumer likes it a certain way.
For years, the ones that we used to like are ones that you don't find on the market too much anymore. There weren't a lot of problems, but there's got to be off breeds of them. Like they develop a little further. One was the Rutgers out of New Jersey. Rutgers and what else? What are the tomatoes that are good growers that you don't have a lot of problems with?
I can't remember.
Yeah, it's well. Yeah, come in here. Yeah.
If I open up a seed catalog, I can.
Right. Yeah.
Hi.
This is John's wife.
I see. But they have to be ones with. You got to deal with resistant varieties and flavor, because you're going to grow tomatoes. You have to grow tomatoes, and then what'll happen is if you have a resistant variety and none, you see the difference. So heirlooms are tricky, like you were saying, because they were the types of tomatoes we bred away from. But there were some things we liked about them, so they're high maintenance. But you said, what the heck were they? I can't remember. I have to look at a seed catalog. But there were a couple of real nice ones which weren't so big. They were semi-round.
Celebrity, New York. There was New Yorker.
New Yorker tomato.
New York.
Those are still
available. Celebrity
and you had production and you had turnover.
Marglo.
You weren't. Now there's another one I just can't think of. It'll come to my mind.
So what's your favorite?
But the cherries are always a hassle. I like the bigger cherries.
They go good in the restaurant. They go good in the restaurant.
Favorite to eat?
What's your favorite to eat? Brandywines?
Oh yeah.
I like the brandywines a lot.
Too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Brandywines are for farmers to grow. If you see them in the market, that's good because farmers don't want to grow it for market because when you pick it, by the time you get to market, it's because it's split, it's dripping, and people don't want to buy a product like that.
Yeah.
Even though it's okay like that too, but
Yeah.
it doesn't hold up to be very good.
And the thing about tomatoes is that the taste is in the gel, and the taste in the gel gets more intense with sunlight. So you can have the same tomato and it tastes different at different time of the year or a different season, and it all has to do with it's all about sunlight with tomatoes. They're tropical plants. They love them like that, and that's why the ones in the fall. I used to jar sauce for tomatoes, but I used to only jar the ones in the fall because we were too busy either selling or using the other ones. And then the end of the season would come, we'd get all the tomatoes and jar them, and they'd always be terrible. And they'd be like, "Why do they taste like this?" And it's because they were used the fall. You know, it just wasn't the same. But still, it was better than nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this is very impressive. It's very nice.
Well, you haven't seen the other side yet.
So final question.
Oh, right. Okay.
What
Yeah.
so in terms of home growers, that everybody again, you know, there's all these different ways to do it, different thoughts on how to grow tomatoes well. There's a market, there's a product on the market called a topsy-turvy tomato planter that's upside down.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? You think you can get a good tomato out of an upside down planter?
Everything comes around and around and around again. We used to call these snake oil products. You find them mostly in the garden industry.
Yeah.
They're always like new things. We got this da 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 da. Example was they used to have a fruit
Vertical
tree.
gardening. Vertical gardening, every
Years ago,
different way you do
disappears, now
it.
it
Planting
comes
it
back
this
again.
way, let it hang down that way. The beauty of that is then you're not worried about staking too much.
Yeah.
That's
You
the
can put it
beauty
on
of
your
it,
small
but-
space garden, on your fire escape in the city or something like
We used to
that.
have a back in the 50s fruit tree that would have 5 different types of apple varieties on it. But of course, what happened, one variety would become dominant after a while, and you just have that. They even came out with a tomato plant that had, they graft
Yeah.
to get varieties. But there's always things in gardening. The garden weasel, this and that.
Yeah.
And everything is, and they also claim that it's less work and effort, which is not the case. There's no less work and effort whenever you're dealing with growing crops.
Oh, yeah.
There's no
You're going to have
less of it.
diseases, you're going to have insects, you got to keep your eye on the ball, and that's, are you hobby gardening, and is it fun, or are you producing food and volume? And you have to set your course one way or the other. If you're hobby gardening, anything goes, because it's just, it's fun. It's connected with the plants. If you're producing food, that's a little bit different. You're looking for yield, you're looking for volume, you're looking for a growing season where if you see something's going, you're right in with something else, and, trying to get the most out of that season.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely trying to get the most out of it here, but I'm still having some fun. But thanks for talking with us, and much love hearing your wisdom and from many years of experience and growing here in a pretty peculiar climate, which is New York City. So
Sure is.
thanks for joining us and talking tomatoes with us a little bit.
Well, you're welcome. And you have an ideal growing situation here, being next to the water, which gives you an extended season.
Yeah.
It's going to be warmer here than other places come late October.
We're gonna test that out this winter.